Welcome, everyone. Parshat Vayishlach, Fruits of the Orchard. Tonight is one of the most archetypal stories in the whole Torah. This is the story of Yaakov has come back to Eretz Yisrael, or he's on his way to Eretz Yisrael. And it's inevitable that he has to meet his brother. After many, many, many years, if we remember from last week, he left Israel for two reasons. One is because Esav wanted to kill him, and the other reason is to get married. Now he's coming back with the whole family, and he sends messengers. That's how the parsha opens, Vayishlach Malachim. So Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. So Rashi says a classic Rashi. Two words. He says Malachim Mamish. Because it's usually translated, he sent messengers. He says, no, he sent angels for real. Mamish. And that word is very popular in today's jargon, is mamish. And here we have Rashi saying malachim mamish. I heard a good, we'll call it a joke, but you know what has the same gematria as mamish? Psh. Pei shin. Psh. So when you say mamish, you go psh. Has the same gematria, 380. Okay, so Yaakov sends messengers, he sends angels, and Rashi tells us he had three purposes in mind. And a very important Rashi says this is the best advice for Israel at any time when confronted by a possible enemy or obstacles. He sent him gifts to lefayes, to find favor in his eyes. He prayed and he prepared for war. And Rashi says this is like very good advice. And to this day, we really use these three things when confronted, as unfortunately we are at a constant level here in Israel, constant level. We have to try to make peace, we have to pray, and we have to prepare for war. And then we get to the verse that I want to get to. And that is, for those who are following on in chapter 32, verse 25, Lamed Bet, Pasuk Chav He. And first it says he sent the gifts, and Esav's coming with 400 men. And so he splits his camp, and he says that if Esav attacks one, at least the other one will have some warning. So that's how he's preparing for war. And it says that he moved everything over, and he crossed the Nachal. There was a stream there, and he crossed over. And the implication is he crossed over with his family. But then the verse that we're looking at is Vayivater Yaakov levado. And Yaakov was left alone. Vayavek ish imo, and a man fought with him. Ad alot hashachar, until the first rays of light in the morning. So Rashi and everyone else asks, in the context of this verse, the question is, what does it mean he was left alone? It just sounded like he was with his family And how could he have been alone? So Rashi says he forgot small vessels and he went back to retrieve them. That's what Rashi says. This also, the commentators go to shop with this one. Like, what does it mean? He left little vessels, and the gematria of Pachim Ketanim, I believe, with its kollel, is one more than Mashiach. So we're going to get back to Mashiach. But the question is, what does it mean that he was left alone? Now, if he was left alone, how was he fighting with a person? There was a person there. So how was he alone? So this leads us into a whole discussion of what we'll call aloneness. That's what I want to explore tonight. This idea of being alone. So we'll start with the idea that in a very practical way, a very real way, in a very existential way, every single person, no matter how much family they have around them, how many friends they have, how many coworkers they have, how big a community, all of us are existentially alone. This doesn't mean necessarily being lonely, but we're born alone. We die alone. We're alone with our thoughts 24/7. That is the existential reality of a human being. And yet, the paradox is, by nature, I mean, there are some exceptions, very rare exceptions, but in most cases, even people who like to be alone, a human being is a social animal. We seek out people to love. We seek out friends. We seek out companions, a family, a spouse, connection with parents, parents with children. So if you see where I'm going here, we have a paradox in the very nature of a human being, that there is a place that we are alone. And there's a place where we're not comfortable with being alone, and a human being is driven to have relations with other people. So in the book of Devarim, let me get the exact verse here. Give me 1 second. Yes, it's in Deuteronomy 32:12. Deuteronomy 32:12, where it says, this is in Parshat Ha'azinu, and it says that God alone leads them, and there is no foreign God with him. I'll say that again, that God alone leads them, and there is no foreign God with him. I want to get that for the Hebrew for everyone very quickly. Hashem badad yanchenu ve'ein imo el nechar. Hashem Now here is badad, levad, badad, the same root. God alone leads them. Now, if you just change the punctuation slightly, you could read it, the same words, as Hashem badad. Hashem is alone. Kama, yanchenu, he leads them. So what's the importance of this? The importance is that a human being's aloneness is rooted in God's aloneness. Because we are created in the image of God, and God is one, unique, and in a sense alone, because there's nothing else like him. But every single human being is created in that image. It's a very, very powerful idea that our reality, the context in which we live is based on us not only being a creation of God, but that we have a godly spark in us. And so we share with God this sense of aloneness. Now, as I said before, aloneness may or may not imply being lonely. In other words, when a person doesn't want to deal with their aloneness, but they can't connect with other people, it can lead to loneliness. But here we're looking at aloneness in a very positive sense. This is the unique quality that God creates every single person, is with this aspect of aloneness. Now, in the verse that we said, Vayivater Yaakov levado, and Yaakov was left alone. So the word Vayivater, and he was left, equals 622, equals Beketer, in the aspect of the crown. Now, why do we need to go here? Because in the crown, according to Kabbalah and Chassidut, there are 3 different levels of consciousness. The highest level is called Emunah, which is faith. The next one is called Ta'anug, which is pleasure. And the third one is called Ratzon, will. So this is actually, I'm only realizing now, a very deep connection to the song we just played. Poter et yadecha umazbir lekol chai ratzon. The idea of will, ratzon. So this is a teaching from Rav Ginsburg, who says that the paradox that we're talking about is found in Keter. That's why the significance of the word Vayivater is the gematria in Keter. Why is that? Because Tanug, pleasure, on this level means the pleasure that a person gets from their own being. Now, everyone is different, and it's very good. I see that Ephraim just posted the verse that we're dealing with in the chats in Hebrew. So everyone, like I said, everyone is different. Some people have a very hard time being alone. Other people have a very hard time being with people. And then, of course, there's this huge span in between. But everyone experiences times where we really need to be alone. We need that space. We need that quiet. We need that inner possibility of aloneness. And that's Tanug. On the highest level, there is and should be a a level where we get great pleasure from just being alive and who we are. On the other hand, Ratzon, will, on this level of Keter, is the will to act in the world, to interface with reality, the world, and other people. So here you could see in Keter, we have the seed of this paradox that we all deal with. Many people don't have a problem. It's the balance is very healthy. Other people are very, very challenged by the paradox of aloneness and the will and the desire to interact with reality and people. And so the highest level, even though it's the highest level, so Rav Ginsburg says that is the mediator between these two forces. The force of aloneness in a positive sense, and the desire, the will to be involved in the world, and especially with other people. And that faith, here faith means being true and faithful to both of these drives in a human being. And so Emunah is the mediator that helps us make the balance between these two ideas. Now, we already mentioned this one verse that Hashem badad yadchenu, Hashem alone leads them, or Hashem is alone, he leads them. But there's another very, very important verse, and that is in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 11. And that is, V'nisgav Hashem levado bayom hahu. This is talking about the Messianic era and the revelation of godliness in the world, and the revelation that Ein od levado, there's none other than him. Levado is the same root as levad or badad, that God alone will be elevated in that day. V'niskav Hashem levado bayom hahu. And so here again, we have two examples of Hashem being called levad, and here Yaakov is being called levad. Here it says, Vayivater Yaakov levado, v'yavek ish imo ad alot hashachar. Now, there's, I haven't sung this in a while. I'm going to attempt this because Reb Shlomo made a song with these two verses together. He made a song with these two verses together, and it goes something like this. Let me sing the nigun first. V'niskav Hashem levado, Hashem levado biyom hahu. V'niskav Hashem levado, Hashem levado biyom hahu. Vayivater Yaakov levado, vayavek ish imo, ad alot hashachar, ad alot hashachar. Vayivater Yaakov levado, vayavek ish imo, ad alot hashachar, ad alot hashachar. There's a classic song from Reb Shlomo, but he puts these two verses together. They don't appear together. One's in Isaiah, one's in Genesis. But he put them together because of this connection of Levado and Levado. Now, when Bilam is trying to curse the Jews, but God turns everything into a blessing. So Bilam said, they are a nation that will dwell alone and will not be counted among the nations. So he meant it for a curse. He meant it like this is like almost classic anti-Semitism that we don't count. We're not counted among the nations. Israel is by themselves. They don't count among the nations. In the positive sense, this emphasizes our uniqueness. And this is what I believe we learned a few weeks ago. We learned that Avram is called Avram HaIvri. Avram, the one who, Ivri means who crossed over. And the Midrash says that Avram, with his belief in one God, so he stood on one side of the world and the entire world stood on the other side. And so sometimes this is what Bilam would have liked. We'll put Avram over there and the rest of the world over here. But Avram's intention was not to remain there alone. His intention is, I need to make this step in order to separate myself from the world of idol worship, but eventually everyone will come over to this side. That's my mission. That's Avram's mission. So Bilam meant it for a curse, but our uniqueness is not a curse, it's a blessing. But of course, that blessing cannot be a means for arrogance or undue pride. And it has to be true to the mission of bringing Mashiach and creating harmony and peace and love in the world between all peoples. Now we'll go back one more, and then we'll go one in the future. We go all the way back to the book of Bereshit. So this really emphasizes that even though we said that there is a certain divine pleasure that a person should have with their own being. Now, unfortunately, we know from psychology that a lot of people don't like themselves. They have very, very low self-esteem and do not get actually pleasure from who they are and being alone. Obviously, that's not how it should be. We should have a certain level of joy and pleasure in just being who we are. But God comes along and says, right after, one second. I'm sorry, I'm just not finding it right now. Where, oh, God, okay, good. It's chapter 2, Pasuk 18. Bet Yudchet in Genesis. It says, V'yomer Hashem Elokim, lo tov hiyot adam levado, v'aseh lo ezer kenegdo. So here we have Adam, but Adam is we'll call it an androgynous being. And there's not the, let's say, proper relationship between male and female. So God says it's not good for Ha'adam to be alone. I will make for him a helpmate. So here we go all the way back to Genesis to see the root of the other side of the coin, where even though our existential reality is being alone, God says it's not healthy, it's not good. So here again, we have this balance that every person has to try to find between being alone and being involved in the world, and especially with other people. So that's going all the ways back to actually the creation of Adam, because the next thing that we have is God separates the male and female components of Ha'adam, of Adam. And then it says, and therefore a man leaves his mother and father and clings to his wife, and they become basar echad, they become one flesh. Now we go to a prophecy in the future where it says that from Zechariah, and actually, well, that's the second part, but it says in the prophets that in the future, Israel, this is the Rashi in the book of Devarim, where it says that Israel will dwell alone in security, in betach, bitachon. And Rashi brings from Zechariah this idea that in the future, every person will be able to live alone under their fig tree and their vine. And Rashi explained it's not like everyone will live alone, but he says that because there will be no more war, people won't have to gather together in order to defend themselves against enemies. That's the meaning of being alone, is that when there's peace, we could band together for all kinds of positive things, but we won't have to band together in order to fight enemies. So that's one of the visions of Mashiach, is that every person will be able to live alone under their fig tree and their vine. So I'll just mention in passing is that when we came to the Moshav, the house that we moved into had a huge fig tree growing out of a cave right by our front door. Not everyone has a cave right by their front door, but we did, and we had this huge fig tree. So one of the first things that we did is across from the fig tree, even closer to the front door, we planted a grapevine. So we could fulfill this prophecy that we'll be able to dwell under our fig tree and our vine. And both of them made shade for us. Made shade for us. So that was just a personal aside. Okay, now having set up the context of Yaakov fighting with this angel, but deeper, the question is, who was he fighting with? And this is not the main thing I want to deal with tonight, but I really have to in order to really understand the names Yaakov and Yisrael. So in the verse that we read, it says he fought with a man. Rashi says it was an angel. When he names the place, he calls it Piniel, which means, and Yaakov explains why. He says, because I have seen God face to face, and I have survived. And when the man, angel, God confers on him a new name of Yisrael, so the Torah gives us the definition of Yisrael. This is very, very important. The Torah actually gives us a definition of what does it mean that he's now called Yisrael and not Yaakov. And it says, Ki sarita im Elokim v'anashim v'tuchal. You contended, you fought, you even actually embraced God and man, and you were successful. You triumphed. That is the meaning of Yisrael. How did he get the name? Because it said that the man, angel, God could not defeat Yaakov, and he said, oh, the angel said, okay, let me go. And Yaakov says, I won't let you go until you bless me. Now I'm just using the word angel. And the angel said, what is your name? And he says, Yaakov. And the angel said, no longer will you be called Yaakov, rather Yisrael, ki sarita im Elokim v'anashim v'tuchal, because you contended with God and man, and you triumphed. That is the meaning of Yisrael. This obviously has a very, very profound effect on every Jew in every generation. And I would say especially now, the surrounded as we are, and with the, I wouldn't say very recent, but definitely a tremendous upsurge in anti-Semitism virtually everywhere. It's in the news all the time now. We need to understand what Yisrael means. So we see that he was fighting with a man. Who is the man? Esav. Because the next day he is going to meet Esav in the flesh. He's already sent gifts. He's already prayed. He's already prepared for war. And now he's left alone. And the missing link here is, in a sense, the most important person Yaakov is fighting with is himself. He has to come to terms with who he is, what his destiny is. Did I really deserve the firstborn? Am I really the firstborn? Did I deserve the blessing? And he had to fight to come to a understanding so he could meet Esav the next day and survive. The Torah even says he was afraid. He was afraid of meeting Esav. So he is classic fighting with himself. And one could even, because like we said, the word vayivater, he was left alone. In a certain sense, where is this whole battle happening? The Torah gives us a location, but on a deep level, the whole thing was happening inside his head. The whole thing was happening beketer, in his deep unconscious. It doesn't mean it's less real. It doesn't mean that God did not dispatch an angel. But in a certain way, the whole battle was in his heart, his soul, and his mind. So now that we've introduced the beginning of understanding this name change. We know any name change in the Torah is highly significant, and it means that a person takes upon themselves a new identity. And yet we have something very unique about Yaakov, a question that has been asked throughout the ages. Abraham's name was also changed from Avram to Avraham. Sarah's name was changed from Sarai to Sarah. But you never see, once their name is changed, of them being referred to again by their old name. They have a whole new identity. The exception, and there are other people in the Torah whose names are changed, and it remains that way. But Yaakov, it goes back, the rest of the book of Bereshit, sometimes he's Yaakov, sometimes he's Yisrael. The Torah refers to him as either Yaakov or Yisrael. And so we see that, first of all, we can explain this because the very definition of Yisrael is like on such a high level. You contended with God and man and you prevailed. Well, Yaakov was a human being like all of us. His greatness was beyond our concept, but he was still a human being. And every human being has their ups and their downs and makes mistakes and learns and grows. And so it's almost on purpose that the Torah goes back and forth between these two names. Because in a sense, when we read the stories of Yaakov, Avram and Yitzhak are such spiritual giants. We read their stories and they're just full of awe, full of grandeur and symbolism and allegory. Yaakov, a lot of his trials and tribulation are just very down to earth. And yet, the sages say that Yaakov is the choicest of the patriarchs. Because of that, because he was able to contend with God and man and prevail. And we're just beginning with Yaakov, really. We have the whole rest of the book of Bereshit to follow Yaakov. But one thing that we see, and that was for those who were here from the beginning, that's why I picked the song, Poteach et yadecha, open up your hand. And we learned that the sages say, don't read it, open your hand, open your yud. Yadecha, yudecha. They sound the same. Now, what's significant is the first letter of Yaakov is a yud, and the first letter of Yisrael is a yud. The first letter of God's name is a yud. Yud and hey and vav and hey. And so let's just look at the name Yaakov for a second. And here it's yud ekev. Ekev means heel. Why did he get this name? Because his hand was holding on to the heel of Esav when he was born. That's how he got his name. Yud, Yad, Ekev. His hand was holding on to the heel. Now, if you look at the name Yisrael, so one of the permutations of Yisrael is Li Rosh. To me is a head, or I have a head. I have a Jewish cup. And here we see a beautiful set of opposites. Yaakov is the heel. The heel is the bottom of the body. The head, Li-ro, is the top of the body. So here, in a sense, in a sense, when we said that Yaakov was struggling with his own destiny. And in a sense, if we remember the dream of the ladder was entrenched in the earth and its head reached the heavens. And it says its head. So that's like the ladder was Ekev, the heel, and the head, the Rosh. So during that archetypal wrestling match, Yaakov is transformed in a sense from the heel to the head, from the bottom to the top. And yet he maintained his connection to the earth. And that's why so many of his trials are very earthly, very, very on a practical level, what he goes through. Now, here's something we've mentioned before. See, now that we're analyzing the name Yisrael, I want to go deeper into it. And we mentioned this before, but it's just a beautiful thing that the first letter of all 7 patriarchs and matriarchs are in the word Yisrael. The Yud of Yisrael is Yaakov, and of course Yisrael and Yitzchak. Yitzchak begins with a Yud. The Shin of Yisrael is Sarah. The Resh is Rivka and Rachel. The Aleph is Avraham. And the Lamed is Leah. So you have all 7 patriarchs and matriarchs in the name Yisrael. So that's a very beautiful thing. Now, one of the articles in this week's Parsha, in Fruits of the Orchard, oh, okay. My wife was listening. She brought this picture. This is from Avraham Lowenthal.
It's ancient.
This is one of his first pictures from a long time ago. And he found this in some book, some sefer. And he has here, instead of just one Yud and one Resh, he put the Yaakov and the Yitzchak and the Rachel and the Rivka in the name. And all of this is very, very Kabbalistic, but this is apparently a pretty ancient diagram. I can't tell you what the source is, that shows the connection by seeing all of the Avot and the Imahot in the name Yisrael. So thank you, Rachel. Okay, so one of the articles in this Parsha, first we have about the name Yisrael, and then there is a very innovative idea. For those who have the book, it's on page 106. It's called The Name Yisrael and the Power of the Feminine. So this is where I'm going to continue here. Now, we see that all of the Avot and the Imahot are in the name Yisrael, but the root of the word is the sin in the resh, sar, which means a prince, or Sarah, which means a princess. So of all of the Avot and the Imahot, the one that's most connected in the actual linguistics of the word Yisrael is Sarah. Sarah. And even the verb here, we have kisarita, is based on the root Shin Resh, or here it's Sin Resh. So this is a very, very important idea. And this is one of the ways we can understand the very, very important concept of who is a Jew, one whose mother is Jewish. Jewishness is conferred through the mother. And here, this is a deep hint to this. And we see, and this is a connection to the story of when Sarah insists that Avram sends away Hagar and Yishmael. This is a very, very hard story. It has implications to this day. To this day, there's implications of Hagar and Yishmael being sent away. And yet, it was clear that Avram not only was not happy with it, he really didn't want to do this. God himself came and said, everything that Sarah is telling you, listen to her voice. Now, there are many things in life that are hard, but that doesn't make them wrong. And it took God himself to tell Avram, you have to listen to your wife. She knows what's happening here. And even though it's hard to have sent Ishmael away, God was saying it will be much worse if you don't. You don't understand what the implications might be if you don't. So here we have Sarah is saying it's through Yitzchak and Yitzchak alone that Jewishness will be conferred. And so here we see the connection to the Jewish law, but here we're finding what's called a remez, an allusion, a hint in the word Yisrael, that it's Sarah who's the most prominent here. Now, when Yaakov meets Esav the next day, Esav questions, like, why did you send me all of these gifts? I have a lot. I have a lot already. You don't have to give me gifts. And so in response, Esav said, I have a lot. Yaakov says, I have everything. Yesh li kol. I have everything. So what does this mean on a deep way? So first of all, yesh li kol, you take those same letters and you permute them, it comes out maskil, someone who has seichel. This is connected to the permutation of Yisrael being li rosh. I'll say that again if I went too fast. Yesh li kol, I have everything. Those letters make up the word maskil, from the word sechel. Sechel means intellect. This is connected to what we learned before, the permutation of Yisrael being li rosh. So Yaakov is telling Asa, first of all, I'm now Yisrael, and I know what I'm doing. Just like Sarah knew what she was doing. And Asa, in the end, he took the gifts. But one of the deep connections here is, what does it mean I have everything? Well, the word kol equals 50. And one of the most famous concepts connected with the number 50 is the 50 gates of understanding. Chamishim Sharei Bina. So in a deep way, Yaakov was saying, I know what I'm doing. I have all 50 gates of understanding. But here, I want to take it like one step further. Is in the Gemara, it says that, first of all, Chachma, wisdom, is always associated with the masculine energy, and Bina is always associated with feminine energy. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that women don't have Chachma and men don't have Bina. But we're talking about in symbolic terms. Chachma is the seed of intellect, and Bina is the womb in which intellect can develop. And so these 50 gates of understanding are connected to the feminine. In the Gemara, it says that women were given an extra measure of understanding more than men. So here, Yaakov is saying something very, very deep. He's saying that I'm not just connected to my masculine sense. I have everything. I have the masculine and the feminine. Now, this is connected to another statement in the Gemara that says that Yaakov looked like Adam Arishon. He looked like the first Adam. Now, remember, Adam at one point was male and female. And then they were separated. When they were separated, it meant that now there's an entity that is masculine, but still maintains a feminine sense. And now we have a feminine entity that also maintains a masculine sense. So when Yaakov is saying Yesh li kol, and the word kol is 50, and 50 is connected to the 50 gates of understanding, and understanding is connected to the feminine energy, and the feminine energy was given a measure of understanding greater than men. Now we can understand why God had to come to Avram and say, you have to listen to Sarah. She's one step ahead of you here. She knows what she's saying. She has one extra measure of understanding. Okay, now we're going to bring one more idea. And for those who have the book, it's on page 108. This is an amazing, amazing teaching from Rav Ginsburg. If we take the same permutation of Yisrael being Li Rosh, to me is a head. I have a head. I'm a maskil. Then the letter Resh is connected to the concept of Rosh. In other words, the letter Resh its meaning is Rosh. Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah begins with a Resh. Now look at the middle letter of Yisrael. The middle letter of Yisrael is a Resh. So Rav Ginsburg says, connected to everything I just gave over, he said that there are 10, call them famous women in the Tanakh, in the Bible, that all have a Resh in their name. Now, it doesn't mean that a woman who doesn't have a Resh in their name is not important or a great soul, like Leah. Leah does not have a Resh, but Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel do. Leah, that's a difference. So Leah's like a very, very high level. So I just want to go very quickly through this. For those who don't have the book, Beli Neder will post this tomorrow on the WhatsApp. I do hope everyone is making use of the WhatsApp. We're sending every Monday and Thursday lots of things. And of course, you get the recording again and everything else. So very quickly, and the level, and Rav Ginsburg, this is what is called making a partsuf. This is one of the greatest innovations of Rav Ginsburg that has incredible implications of how to learn Torah. But here, making a partsuf, we'll post the WhatsApp link, Bezrat Hashem. Making a partsuf means creating a full stature or structure of any particular idea. So here the idea is, in a sense, that women have this extra level of understanding, of rosh, of reish, yesh li kol, the feminine aspect of the name Yisrael. So very quickly, in the level of Keter is Sarah. Sarah, of course, is the first of the matriarchs, and she's really like the top here. She's really the top. In Chachma, we have Rivka. And this, even though we could go into all of these in great detail, but Rivka was the one who understood that Yaakov has to get the bracha from Yitzchak. This is what we learned last week. And it's very similar to the way Sarah understood that Yitzchak had to be the one through which Jewishness comes. So Rivka did the same thing. She understood that it had to go through Yaakov and not Esav. And that took tremendous wisdom. On the level of understanding, so this is Rachel. And one of the ways that we can understand it is that when Rachel gave the signs to her sister, she understood on such a deep level that as much as she was like this total soulmate of Yaakov, and he had just worked 7 years for her, and they were madly in love, but she understood on a level of Bina that Yaakov had to marry Leah also. On the level of Chesed, this is Miriam. This is the classic story of when Moshe was sent on this little ark on the Nile. Who knows what would be with him? It was Miriam who's watching over him. It's Miriam who made sure that his real mother nursed him. When the daughter of Paro took Moshe, and Miriam comes running like, oh, should I get you a nursemaid? But it was her chesed. She had tremendous chesed for her brother, Moshe. Gevura, Devorah, a warrior. She was a warrior. Tzipporah is beauty. And there are many hints to this, but she is beauty. She's Teferet. Netzach is Tamar. Tamar also had this incredible sense of understanding that she had to have children from the family of Yehuda. And through her actions, she helped establish the house of David forever. All the kings would come through Yehuda and eventually David ad Mashiach. So this is the level of eternity. Ruth is Hod. She was, one of the meanings of Hod, the inner meaning of Hod is sincerity. She was so sincere. So she's like considered like the archetype of a sincere convert. She was so like perfectly sincere. And of course, Mashiach comes through Ruth as well. So she is Hod. Rachav is Yesod. And this, you have to read the whole story of how Rachav helps Yoshua and conquer Jericho and eventually marry him. And marriage is connected with Yesod. But the things that she says is some of the foundations of Jewish thought. And the last one is obvious. Esther is Malchut. Esther is kingship. Esther Amalka. So we went through that very quickly, but it just, and they all have a ration. That's the point. Every single one of these women have a resh in their name. And all of it had to do, each one of them in their own way, had an extra measure of understanding. And this is engraved in the name Yisrael. This is what I term the feminine, the power of the feminine in the name Yisrael. So I'll end with a bracha, because a lot of what we were talking about tonight, to put the two parts together, we began talking about the paradox and the balance that we need, each and every person, between being alone, feeling good about being alone, and at the same time, the need and desire and the positive aspect of relating with the world and other people. And here, the second thing is in the name Yisrael, we see both the masculine and the feminine. And so each and every person has to learn to balance all of these energies in a healthy, holistic way.